There is exactly one outfield player in the entire history of the Ballon d'Or, and then there is one goalkeeper, a single man whose name breaks every assumption about what position can carry a sport. The world has spent decades calling it an accident of history, a fluke of Cold War politics, but those people never watched him play. Before anyone called him the Black Spider, before the Golden Trophy and the sold-out stadiums, there was a city still bleeding from war, a broken family, and a boy who had decided football was not for him. What changed his mind would shape the next half-century of the sport. He was born in 1929 into a Moscow that had no room for dreamers. His father worked at the locomotive railway plant, and the family lived in a communal apartment where privacy was a luxury no one could afford. The Second World War arrived when he was just 12 years old, and Moscow became something unrecognizable, a city preparing to be destroyed. The football pitches turned to rubble, and the boys who had played on them were suddenly workers, guards, survivors. During the war he worked in a factory alongside grown men, operating machinery designed for hands twice his size. It was there, in the smoke and the grind of metal, that he developed the physical strength and quiet discipline that no training ground could ever have taught him. When the war ended, he returned to sport, but not to football. He had fallen in love with ice hockey and bandy, sports that demanded lightning reflexes and the willingness to throw your body in front of something moving very fast. That instinct would later terrify forwards across all of Europe. His return to football was almost accidental. The Lokomotiv youth setup took him in and placed him in goal almost as an afterthought. They already had forwards, they needed someone willing to take the hits. What they got was something they could not explain. But early promise did not protect him from collapse. In his first years at the senior level he suffered what could only be described as a complete psychological breakdown on the pitch. A crisis of confidence so severe that he could not command his own penalty box. He turned to alcohol. It is a part of the story that Soviet football tried to bury for decades, but those close to him never denied it: the pressure, the isolation, the fear of failure in a system that punished failure in ways that went far beyond being dropped from a team. If you have ever wondered why some stories endure while others disappear into history, it is because someone refused to let them die. And if you want more stories like this one, buried beneath decades of silence, follow Football Untold right now, because we are just getting started. The club that saved him was CSKA Moscow, but even there he could not hold the starting position. He was seen as fragile, unreliable, a talent that consumed itself. In a league full of technically gifted goalkeepers, he was considered the least likely to matter. Then came the move to Dynamo Moscow, and with it, a coach who saw not what he was, but what he could become if someone simply refused to give up on him. That decision changed everything. Dynamo Moscow was not just a football club, it was the club of the Soviet secret police, with connections to power that made every match feel like something more than sport. Playing for Dynamo meant playing in a spotlight that never switched off. Under the mentorship of Alexei Komish, the legendary goalkeeper who came before him, he began to transform. He studied the position the way a scientist studies a theorem, breaking it apart and rebuilding it with his own logic. He invented the concept of the sweeper-keeper long before anyone had a name for it. He charged off his line, he read the play before it developed, he commanded his area with the authority of a general, not a man standing between two posts waiting for something to happen. His breakthrough came during the 1956 Melbourne Olympics. The Soviet Union needed a goalkeeper who could handle the weight of a nation on his back, and he delivered a tournament so dominant that rival coaches sent scouts just to try to understand what they had witnessed. The Soviet Union won gold. He was not simply the best goalkeeper in the tournament. According to those who were there, he was in a category so far above his position that foreign journalists struggled to describe him without reaching for metaphors borrowed from other sports entirely. 2 years later came the 1958 World Cup in Sweden, and with it, the global stage. He conceded only 2 goals across the entire tournament. The forwards who faced him in those matches described the experience as trying to score against someone who already knew what you were going to do. His style was unlike anything European football had seen. Most goalkeepers of the era were static, reactive, rooted to their line by convention. He moved like something predatory, angles cut, positions taken, decisions made before the ball had even left the striker's foot. In 1960 the Soviet Union won the inaugural European Championship. He was 30 years old, now in his absolute prime, and the continent's footballing establishment could no longer pretend he was merely very good. He was redefining what very good meant. The nickname Black Spider emerged from a Chilean newspaper during the 1962 World Cup. A journalist watched him make 4 saves in a single passage of play that should have produced 4 goals, and wrote that it was like watching a black spider in its web, catching everything that came near. In 1963 he became the only goalkeeper in history to win the Ballon d'Or. The football world paused. Even those who had watched him for years seemed surprised that the trophy had finally acknowledged what their eyes had been telling them for a decade. He went on to represent Dynamo Moscow for 22 consecutive years, making over 800 appearances. He played until he was nearly 40 years old, and in his final seasons younger forwards admitted they still felt something unexpected when they lined up to face him, something close to doubt. He kept a clean sheet in over 270 official matches across his career. 270 times the net behind him stayed empty. For a goalkeeper who played in an era of physical forwards and heavy leather balls, this was not statistics, it was something closer to architecture. When he retired in 1970, he did not disappear. He became an ambassador for the sport with a grace that seemed to come as naturally to him as the diving saves. Always dignified, always quiet, never performing his own legend for an audience. FIFA named him the greatest goalkeeper of the 20th century. The award that carries his name today is given to the best goalkeeper at every World Cup, and in the irony that history sometimes allows, it is a prize that no goalkeeper has yet matched with the completeness he himself demonstrated. He was diagnosed with cancer in his later years and his left leg was amputated. He faced this the way he had faced every striker who ever ran at him, without flinching, without complaint, with a stillness that people around him found almost impossible to comprehend. He passed away in March of 1990, at the age of 60. The Soviet Union would dissolve 18 months later, and with it much of the institutional memory that had surrounded his career. But what he had built on football pitches across 2 continents could not be dissolved by any political border. In Moscow there is a statue of him outside the Dynamo Stadium. He stands in full extension, mid-save, frozen at the exact moment of the impossible made ordinary. Children who have never seen him play stop and look up at it and feel something they cannot name, which is exactly what he made strikers feel for 22 years. The Black Spider is not simply a chapter in football history. He is the proof that a single human being, in a single position, with enough will and enough refusal to accept the limits others assign to them, can permanently alter the way an entire sport understands itself. Every goalkeeper who charges off their line today, every sweeper-keeper who reads the game before it happens, every shot stopper who commands their area like it belongs to them, they are all playing a position that one man from a Soviet communal apartment decided to rebuild from the ground up. There are hundreds of stories like this one, buried, forgotten, waiting to be told. And if this one stayed with you, follow Football Untold, because the next story is already waiting for you.